Aloha! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Nairobi Real Estate Insights. This is the show where we delve into the world of real estate. I'm your host, Koch, your buyer's real estate agent with a passion for helping people find their dream homes. Today we have a special guest. Aside of a beautiful personality, our guest today is a highly skilled real estate lawyer who is going to help us understand the legal aspect of buying real estate or buying a property in Nairobi. So let's go meet Maria.
Actually also important to ask you lawyer questions, and also the lawyer should take you through each term of the agreement clause by clause, explaining to you what your risks and opportunities are in the agreement. My name is Maria Muhirwe. I am a partner at PI Onyango & Co. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and I am also an advocate of the High Court of Uganda, and therefore licensed to practice law in both countries. I practice real estate, banking and finance, and private client matters.
Maria, we are delighted to have you here. I'm so excited, super excited to have you. And to kick things off, there's this question that's on top of minds of many people are looking to buy a property. What is it? How is it important? What is the importance of having the legal representation when someone is buying a property?
Carol, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. It's such a pleasure to be here. Let me go straight in. It's important to have a lawyer when you are purchasing or selling a property. The role of a lawyer, let me just start with the buyer. When you're purchasing a property, engage a lawyer from the onset. So once you have identified the property, number one, and then secondly, you've agreed on the commercial terms, purchase price and all that, engage your lawyer and inform him or her of the property that you're intending to purchase. So it depends, is it in Nairobi, is it out of town? All those things are important to inform your lawyer. So first and foremost, a lawyer will undertake due diligence on the property. What is a lawyer trying to find out when they are undertaking a due diligence? They want to find out whether the owner is the actual owner of the property, number one. Number two, they want to see, if it's a lease, they want to see the tenure, the duration of the lease, how many years is left on the lease. They want to find out if there are any encumbrances on the property. For example, are there any charges on the property? For instance, if there's a charge of, let's say, 50 million, and you're purchasing the property for 40 million, so is the purchase price going to be able to cover the loan that is on this property? Things like that. Second of all, the lawyer is going to undertake due diligence on the seller. So if the seller is a company, they'll undertake due diligence at the company's registry. If the seller is an individual, they'll also undertake due diligence at the registrar of persons, just to make sure that you're buying property from the rightful person. Number two is the agreement for sale. One thing you have to ensure is you have to have a tight-knit agreement, in the sense that your advocate, your lawyer, is going to make sure to negotiate terms to your benefit for you as a buyer, and also to make sure that all terms are included in the agreement. This will save you a lot of money in case of any issues later on. Thirdly, your lawyer is also going to ensure that completion and registration is done at the lands registry. In fact, it's always important to ask your lawyer to undertake a post-registration search, just to make sure that your interest has been duly registered. Then, if you're a seller, it's important that you have a lawyer to make sure you have all the documentation necessary to complete the transaction, and also to draft this agreement for you that is going to be reviewed by the buyer, and also negotiate terms in your favor. So whether you're a buyer, whether you're a seller, you need a lawyer.
So when a client or a buyer gets this sale agreement, it's not cast on stone. You can still negotiate the terms.
You can always negotiate the terms of the agreement. We negotiate all these terms. There are all these legal issues that are in these sale agreements. And so your advocate, whether you're the buyer or the seller, will come and negotiate these terms.
Can a foreigner buy a property in Kenya?
Yes, a foreigner can own property in Kenya. However, there are some restrictions.
Oh, wow. So what are these restrictions? We are so curious, just like our audience. We want to know, we would love to know what these restrictions are.
So a foreigner cannot own freehold property and also cannot own property with an agricultural user. A foreigner can only own leasehold property, and a leasehold for up to 99 years only.
So if someone is buying a property, what are the legal aspects that they need to watch out when they're buying, especially in Nairobi?
Thank you for that, Carol. It's very important to keep an eye on the legal issues when purchasing property. So it depends on the property. So it could be a vacant piece of land, or it could be a property with a building, or it could be an apartment already complete, or it could be an off-plan apartment. So all these different types of properties, a lawyer would handle it differently depending on the type of property that is before the lawyer. So if it's a vacant piece of property, I'm going to just talk about the issues that cut across all board.
Sure.
Number one is ownership, as I had mentioned earlier. You have to make sure that the person that you're actually purchasing this property from is the rightful owner. So you have to undertake due diligence on the owner of the property, the seller, and whether it's a company or an individual. Second thing, if the property is a vacant property or a property with a house, you have to ensure that the boundaries are in the right place. So it is in the right demarcation. So you have to make sure that the property, as indicated on the deed plan, on the survey plan, the dimensions are the same that are actually on the ground. So you have to make sure the beacons are in place. You have to make sure that the size that is indicated on the title is the same that is indicated on the ground. So of course that's when, of course, we, as a lawyer, you would advise your client to engage a surveyor to undertake a survey over the property. And there are also some other questions that the lawyer will ask a surveyor for confirmation, things to confirm. Is it near wetland? Issues like that. So you have to make sure all those issues have been identified. And even if there are some issues that the property has some issues, then we are able to come and solve those issues even before the sale is complete, and also to give you advice on how to proceed. So if the property, for example, is an apartment that is off-plan, you'll have to make sure your lawyer engages with the developer to provide all these approvals and licenses, and to ensure that the developer has all the licenses and approvals in place before you purchase. In addition, of course, to undertaking due diligence. And then, of course, the contract, the agreement, making sure that the terms are fair for both the purchaser and the seller. And of course, overseeing completion and registration at the end of the day. Yeah.
So Maria, thank you so much for the insights. I hope our audience will find this helpful, and we still have more questions from our audiences.
If you're a seller, you also need a lawyer. So your lawyer will help you ensure you have all the documentation in place for purposes of registration and handing over the same for completion of the transaction. So in addition to that, maybe make sure that you've paid your land rates, your land rent, make sure you have your title, that it's in good shape, or whether if the title is at the bank, the whole issues about discharging the property with the bank, all that. And also, of course, negotiating the contract on your behalf to make sure that your interests are protected as a seller, and just ensuring that the whole process is smooth. To actually add on that, it's actually also important to ask your lawyer questions. And also the lawyer should take you through each term of the agreement, clause by clause. explaining to you what your risks and opportunities are in the agreement. So as a buyer or as a seller, feel free to ask your lawyer all the questions, all the things that you have doubts on or issues that you've experienced before in the past, and just to make sure that the whole process is smooth.
Okay, sure. Thanks for the response, Maria. Question number 2.
Yeah.
What should one do if they discover discrepancies in the property documents after the purchase is complete?
That's a good question. It depends. It depends on what this discrepancy is. I mean, this is after the purchase of the property, so the property is in your name at that point. So it depends on what the discrepancy is. So is it a small one that you can solve on your own? For example, let's say we find that the boundary is what is on the title is not what is on the ground. You can decide, okay, fine, I'll do it on myself, by myself. I will get a surveyor to come and now align and put the beacons in the right place. Or this is something that was provided for in the agreement. Remember, it's important to have a very good agreement to capture any eventualities. So maybe this issue was covered in the agreement. So you go back to the seller and say, under the agreement, this is what we agreed in case of this. This is how we shall handle the matter. I mean, there's a dispute resolution clause and how you're going to handle any disputes. And of course, there are some matters where you have to now go and seek redress from the seller. Yeah.
Thank you. And question number 3, Maria, what steps can I take to protect my property rights as a buyer?
Well, as a buyer, I guess at that point you don't own the property. But let me say you've already purchased the property and now you own the property. Number 1, this is your property. Go and inspect your property and go and visit your property just to see. For example, if it's a vacant piece of land, periodically go visit your property. I'll tell you a story. There's a time somebody bought a property and he said, okay, fine, I bought the property is mine, and went about his business. And then a few years later, he goes to see his property and finds that people had dug a quarry. And so imagine, Carol, you're coming to your property and you find gentlemen carrying bricks out of your property. Yeah, imagine that. So always go back to your property, have a look at it. Also, in that whole inspection, it's important to fence the property, just to protect it from encroachers or squatters. Yeah, and then of course, periodically also undertake searches at the lands registry, just to make sure that the property is still in your name and everything is in good shape. And of course, lastly, always review the Gazette, the Kenya Gazette, and the newspapers to see any notices on property. You never know, you could find your property has been listed and there's some action that needs to be done on your part. So it's important to always keep vigilant of all those things, to mention but a few.
So last but not least, how can I protect myself from buying a property with an unclear or disputed title deed?
As I had said earlier, engage a lawyer. And what is the lawyer going to do? Number 1, he's going to undertake due diligence to see whether this is the rightful owner, you're purchasing from the right person. Number 2, if in case there are any encumbrances, if there's a charge that has been registered, is there a caveat, is there a restriction registered against the title, are there any overriding interests registered on the title, so that you're aware of all these issues that may crop up later. And of course, as I had also mentioned earlier, undertaking a survey if it's a vacant piece of property or a property with a building on it, just to make sure that all these boundary issues are resolved and also confirmed before the purchase is complete, and also making sure that actually the registration is undertaken. Because if registration is not undertaken, registration of the transfer is not undertaken, then it's still registered in the seller's name. So the whole process has to be completed at the lands registry.
What's the role of a real estate agent during the transaction?
Of course, a real estate agent brings the parties together, brings the buyer, brings the seller together so that they can negotiate terms. In fact, real estate agents can help you negotiate some of the commercial terms with the other party. So you as a buyer or seller, on your left hand, have your real estate agent. On your right hand, have your lawyer.
And before we let you go, Maria, when someone is looking to purchase a house, they usually, most of our clients we've dealt with before, they focus on the purchase price. But when they get to the agreement, the sale agreement, we have other costs. So, and so most of the time it's not pocket change, it's not the little money that it determines the affordability of a house. So what do you have to say, talk about, or you can say something about the other costs in the agreement or when someone is purchasing a property?
Yeah, thank you for that, Carl. As you are purchasing a property, in addition to the purchase price, you have to be aware that there are also other costs that would be involved in purchasing this property. Maybe to mention but a few, for instance, you'll have to pay stamp duty on the purchase. So stamp duty is payable against the transfer of the property. So if the property is in a municipality, you'll pay 4% of the purchase price. And if it's out of the municipality, you pay 2% of the purchase price. But of course, this is dependent on the calculations, but the value that will be given against by the government valuer. In addition to stamp duty, you shall have registration costs. And if it's an apartment that you've purchased, there will be some costs, for example, service charge that will be payable. That would be either the monthly service charge or a deposit on the service charge, maybe for 3 months, 6 months, depending on the development. You'll also have costs relating to, let's say, obtaining sectional titles in that regard. And also, if you are purchasing the property and obtaining a loan from the bank, of course, there's some other costs related to obtaining a loan from the bank.
Talk about the legal fees?
And of course, the legal fees. You have to pay your lawyers. Yes.
Is it a standard rate or it's
we are governed by the advocate's remuneration order, whereby this order gives us a minimum of what we should charge as lawyers. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Maria, for these answers, and I hope our audience will find your insights helpful. So to wrap it up, if you were to give just one piece of advice to anyone looking to buy a property, what could it be? Just one advice.
Hire a lawyer. Okay. Number one. And do your due diligence before purchasing your property.
Thank you. You've heard it from Maria how important it is to have a real estate lawyer by your side so that you are buying a property that's legit, your due diligence is done very well, you have your agreement that's airtight, and you will not find yourself in legal issues down the line. So if you're interested in getting in touch or contacting Maria, you know what you do, send us a DM or give us a call today. And to our audience, if you love this conversation and you want to hear more of this, let us know on the comment section below, and please remember to subscribe. And this wraps our episode of Nairobi Real Estate Insights, and until next time, stay informed, stay legal, and goodbye Nairobi.